Welcome everyone to our PhD Perspectives event, the first of two. So if you like this one, we've got another one coming up in a couple of weeks' time. Welcome to our speakers as well. Before we begin, I'd like to just do the acknowledgement of country, acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, and acknowledge their continuing connection to the land, waters, and culture. And we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Before we begin, a quick spiel about the RACI and the ECCG, who we are. The RACI is a professional organisation run entirely by chemists. Some of its professionals in industry, academics, and students. And it's really valuable organisation of people that run great events and help for building your network. So getting to know other chemists and get advice and meet people in different industries and sectors and all the wide world of chemistry. The ECCG in particular is the New South Wales group of students in undergrad, in honours or postgrad, or doing a PhD, as well as graduates and early career scientists. We're officially part of the RACI and we're a group of volunteers. We do events like this webinar, we do career development workshops, site tours, Q&As, all sorts of fun stuff. We're, like I said, all volunteers, so if you want to get involved, you can attend our events, reach out to us if you've got any ideas to how to improve, or if you want to get involved, that'd be great too. So go like our Facebook page, we've got a LinkedIn page as well, and Erin's been very good with running our Twitter account as well. So great to get involved and get to know your peers and really build your professional network. So here's just a quick scheme of some of the events that we've done. There's lots of diversity, site tours, like I mentioned, a lot of more career focused ones, and we've had some particularly interesting Q&A panels. So all sorts of different areas like forensic chemistry, radiochemistry, which I didn't even realize was that big, but that was a really interesting event. And of course, networking events as well. So we cover it all, we do it all, and we try and represent everyone and get events for everyone. So let's get on to it. We've got our speakers today. We've got Dr. Shelley Wickham. Hi, Shelley. We've got Stephen George Williams and we've got Alison Campbell. Yeah, we might just start off by asking you guys a bit about yourselves. Tell us about your PhD and what you're up to now. Let's see, Alison, you can start us off.
Sure, thanks, Andrew. Yes, so I am a PhD student at Sydney University. This is my second year. It's just ticked over since I started in March 2020, which was an interesting time to start a PhD. I'm sure you can all guess why. But anyway, I'm still going along, and what I'm working on is solar cells made from organic material rather than silicon, which is what you would traditionally see out in the world. So that's a really exciting future technology, and we're trying to figure out how it works and how we can make it better. Yep. So maybe I'll pass over. Stephen, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm an education-focused lecturer at the School of Chemistry at the University of Sydney. So all three of the panelists are actually USyd at the moment. In terms of Andrew's question about my PhD, this is where I have to get weird really early on because I have two. So I did one in chemistry and then one in chemistry education. My chemistry work was more physical organic, so I did a lot of synthesis of medium-sized molecules, so maybe 10 or 11 steps for some of them, and then a lot of kinetics, investigations of the reactivity of those molecules. I was particularly looking at polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons at the time, and we were interested in the effects of certain hydrocarbons when they get curved. They're no longer planar. What does that mean for their reactivity? How do they react in comparison to other aromatic systems? I always used to tell the story of this work by saying it had absolutely no application. We were curious, and so I made a PhD out of it. After that, I kind of fumbled around a little bit until I figured out that whilst I love chemistry and bench chemistry, my real passion was always in teaching. And so I kept an eye out and tried to figure out a way to get into teaching, particularly at university. And then, yes, I was insane enough to go do another PhD at Monash University, this time in chemistry education. I was very, very lucky to work with an absolute gun, an amazing person in my field known as Tina Overton. And with her, I worked on undergraduate labs. So I did a lot of questionnaires and interviews and focus groups whilst this really huge overhaul of the lab program was happening at Monash, where the undergraduate labs were being more connected to industry and the labs themselves were becoming more realistic, more representative of actual science, rather than many of the labs that you might remember, or more accurately not remember, as you rushed through in 3 hours and had no idea what you were doing. So we were trying to make them actually more applicable and more worthwhile. So that is the topics that my subsequent PhDs were focused on. So I will stop at that and I'll pass it over to Shelley.
I'll remember to unmute myself. So I guess I'm going to throw some curveballs here as well, because my PhD wasn't in chemistry, it was in physics. And so when I first wanted to do a PhD, I was studying optical materials and biology. So basically butterflies and how they have different colors. And they make these amazing nanostructures that are far beyond anything we can make. And I thought that was really cool, but studying something that exists already wasn't really my style. I wanted to make stuff and like tinker with things. I guess I've like that kind of engineering chemistry kind of, I want to play with things and build things. And so I emailed the guy in the world who did that thing, and I'm like, I want to come and make photonic crystals with you. And he's like, you can't, the equipment's all broken. But I've got this other weird stuff you might be interested in, because you like weird physics, biology mixtures. And that was self-assembling, sort of like supramolecular chemistry, basically made from DNA. And that's how I got into essentially doing a physics PhD with chemicals, more towards biology. And ever since then, yeah, I just love building stuff with molecules. I like DNA because it's cheap and easily available, and we can fold it up into all sorts of structures that we want to make. But I guess, yeah, that was my experience of, each step I took, I just kind of followed the science interested, I guess, similar to what Stephen was saying. Like the next thing that appeared in front of me, I'm like, okay, this sounds good. And then when I came back to Australia, they're like, oh, what we call that chemistry here. It's like, okay, I can be a chemist. Cool. So that's kind of, yeah, that was my PhD journey.
Yeah, interesting. So that's really valuable to see that you didn't actually start in chemistry, but you wound up in chemistry. And Stephen's a madman for doing 2 PhDs. I couldn't imagine doing 1, and he's gone and done 2. Yeah, interesting. So I guess a really important question is, why did you want to do the PhD program, and what specifically appealed to you about it? Alison, I think you've probably thought about that most recently.
Sure, I'll start us off. Really, the thing for me was that I considered it a challenge, and I kind of just have this desire to pick something that's difficult and go, hey, I think maybe I want to figure out how to do that. So this was kind of the latest in that journey. Yeah, I think science is really interesting and really cool, and so I thought, oh yeah, I'd like to pursue this further, and see if I can do this and set myself the challenge of doing a PhD. It's not all bad, it's also fun, but that is kind of why I chose to do it. And I also just really liked the idea of research as like a productive kind of goal-oriented profession. In a way, I didn't like the idea of doing the same thing day in and out, responding to customer inquiries or whatever else happens in the world, of which I have no idea because I've only been at uni. That is all I have done. But I thought, this looks good, I'm going to stay on and I'm going to do a PhD. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Stephen, what about you? What appealed to you about doing a PhD?
So it's going to be no surprise that it depends again. It sounds like I'm bragging every time, but we have to talk about the 2 of them in order to answer the question. So the chemistry one, I was very much following my nose. I actually started in undergrad in a Bachelor of Nanotechnology at the University of New South Wales. After a year of that, and sorry, Shelley, for what I'm about to say, I didn't love the physics, and material science in particular just didn't quite gel with me. But what I really loved in my first year experiences were my chemistry labs. I was in the advanced class, so they kind of let you do your own thing and actually do a proper experiment. And that just really got to me. And so that's what I did. Every summer, I tried to find a different research experience. And I got into a really great research group. I was with the Harper group at UNSW. And I really loved my honors. So I just kept going. I wasn't going for a PhD because I cared about the title. I didn't really think about where I was going afterwards. I had way too much foresight. And at that time, I had none. So I was just enjoying it. I was having a good time. And so I continued on. After my chemistry PhD, though, what I did, looking back, probably should have paid more attention to was what I was going to do afterwards and how I was going to be employable at the other side. So coming out of my chemistry PhD, I hadn't been targeted enough on how is this getting me a paper? How is this getting me the skills I need to stand out in the job market? And so unfortunately, I became a little bit, well, there was a lot of chemistry PhDs. And whilst I knew I was, decent enough and good when I got into a job, it is harder to sell yourself if you don't have enough publications. That is just part of the reality. And so I wasn't being very successful with that. But as I said, I also came to realize I loved teaching, I loved education. And so I was trying to find a way to turn that into a job when I came across the chemistry education PhD at Monash. And as insane as it was to do what I did, it was the most targeted thing I've ever done, where I went, okay, I want to get into this new field. I need to show that I'm worthy of being in this field. So I took on the position and I knew exactly the game to play. Everything was about how is this getting me a paper, or how is this skill that I'm developing going to make me more employable in the kind of job that I want at the other end. So this time when I took a PhD, it was for a very specific reason. And it's kind of how I'm here at UCID right now. I knew what I was doing, I made myself employable, and I got a job. So that was why I did the second time round. So I'll pass over to Shelley.
I like that idea of the redo, redo PhD with all the insight that you can now pass on to other people.
It was a lot
so
easier the second time, I will say that.
So yeah, why did I do a PhD? I think, I just didn't really know what else to do. I guess, you're young, you're like, I really like science. And for the first time, suddenly they're paying you to do it, even though it's a really small amount of you paying them. You're like, oh, cool. This is reverse the equation. And then I just thought, I guess, I'll keep doing this until somebody tells me I have to stop and get a real job. And I'm just feel really lucky that that hasn't happened yet. And I guess similar to Allison, it's also like, you're not really sure how to compare it. Like, I guess I had lots of crappy jobs during undergrad. But since then, it does feel fun. It's stressful sometimes, but I really enjoyed it. And I guess this isn't so relevant now, but I really love to travel. And, doing a PhD or doing postdocs, it's a much easier way to get visas to, like, not just travel to countries, but live in different countries. So, I got to live in 4 different countries during my career so far, and that's been really great. And normally in normal years, you get to travel a lot. So it's like, oh, this is something fun I like to do, and I get to travel. It's like, well, sure, I'll keep doing it.
And we've actually got, Jono is a little bit of a late comer, but we can pass it over to him as well. Jono, just quickly, just to play catch up, tell us about yourself and what your PhD was in and what you do now.
Hey everyone, sorry I was a bit late to the meeting. So my name's Jono. I did my PhD back in at UNSW in the chemistry department with a guy there, Pali Fordasan. And so my PhD was in supramolecular chemistry. I think what really got me into it was I did an honours project with Pali and Sharon Signella, and it was on creating 3D hydrogel systems for in vitro cell culture, like a big goal of many research groups, and this really got me excited about research. And so like continued my PhD in Pali's group, basically going straight into the application in my honours project, not really, us not really understanding the system, trying to understand that more in my PhD. And so looking at these self-assembled peptide systems, trying to understand, what changed their function and whatnot. And then now I've been a postdoc over at Imperial College for 3 years now in Molly Stevens' group, just working on biomaterials on more sort of like translational side. So basically finished my PhD in supramolecular chemistry and then moved straight into like a materials bioengineering group to try and get a bit more of a application focus. It's been yeah, it's been quite exciting.
Yeah. And what made you want to do the PhD? What appealed to you about the program?
Yeah, I don't know. I think similar to Shelley, it was kind of just like at the time, it just seemed like the best option. I had a look into industry at the time, but nothing really sparked my interest as much as research did at the time. And yeah, I was just really motivated behind the project. Really enjoyed working in Parley's group, and kind of yeah, rest is history from there.
And did any of you have? This goes to all of you. Was employment ever a focus for you when deciding to do a PhD? Was it something that was on your mind, or did you just kind of think, I really like doing this, I'm just going to keep going?
Only the second time. The first time, no.
I think it was partly shaped by like where I chose to do it and what I chose to do it in, but I think the idea of having a PhD just seemed really nice to me, as like, this is an achievement that you have, and once you have it, no one can take it away from you. And that felt like something that I wanted.
Yeah, I think I'm similar to Shelley. I didn't really consider employment all that much. I almost thought it was like delaying that decision a little bit, which I thought was good because I didn't know what else I would do. And I did know that if I didn't do a PhD now, my whole life I'd think, oh, what if I did that? Or should I do that now? Or, you know, maybe I should do that in the future, and when would be a good time? And I thought, you know what, I'm convinced that I want to do this challenge. It's almost like, you know, we've been doing lots of puzzles with COVID. It's almost like having a puzzle on the shelf that you think, yeah, I'm going to do that puzzle. I want to do that. That was kind of the feeling I had. And I thought, well, now seems like the best time.
Really cool. Yeah. So what did you enjoy about the program, or are enjoying about doing your PhD? Shelley, do you want to start?
Oh, that's a good question. I liked like going from undergrad and going into research and realizing like science isn't just this solitary thing. Like I think for me, the PhD, like when I think about it, like I think about, oh, like those days where stuff in the lab like either went really well or really terribly, but mostly I think of the people I did my PhD with and how much of a social experience that was, and how I'm still close to all those people, and that sense of being like, you don't have to be this lone scientist shut off from the world. You can be a really happy, socially well-adjusted person with lots of friends and do science, and that's better to do it that way, and people do better science that way. So I think for me, yeah, like the best fun was the people I met.
It's not really a perspective you get to hear very often. I think the idea of a PhD is you just work in the lab and you shut off for 3 years and then you emerge at the other side.
Yeah. But like when you're shut in there with all these other people, you have so many ridiculous conversations. Right. You become great friends.
What about you, Stephen?
Yeah, 100% agree with Shelley on that. Some of my best mates to this day are those that I went through that experience with, if only because you are sharing that very difficult experience together. And you do bond and connect over that. And also not just within who you're doing your PhD with, but the community outside of that, as Shelley was alluding to. When you go to conferences and you start to see the same people and get to know them over a longer period of time, you get excited to go see them and talk to them and work with them. It's a lot of what I do now is collaborations. I don't think any of my projects I do with me. I'm always working alongside or with someone else. And it's a huge part of science. We need it. You need to talk to other people and have those sounding boards and get those other ideas. So it is a huge part of it. But to your point of what did I enjoy about it, I have a very weird love-hate relationship with research itself. I love doing research. I love asking a question, trying to get that data and figuring out what's going on. And then I hate publishing it. I hate writing papers so much. I do it because it is part of the field, it's part of the work. But the actual research, getting the data and figuring out what has happened and how you're going to respond to that, personally, that's like crack to me. I love that part of it. I'm just a naturally curious person. And so a chance to ask these questions and figure out, you know, why this has happened, I always loved that. And I think I always will.
Alison, what do you think?
For me, I think the best bit is that I'm always doing something different. It can be a blessing and a curse, I guess. It feels like as soon as you figure out what one thing is, then all of a sudden you're doing something else. Because the idea is to do something new, right? That you haven't done before, that other people haven't done before, etc. So I really like kind of learning new things in the lab and yeah, just being really hands-on. That's my favorite part. I guess I share some of Stephen's frustration with the desk work. Actually, to be honest, I haven't quite really delved into that world yet, so maybe that's still ahead of me. Yeah, the best bit is definitely in the lab, in my perspective.
And Jono, what did you enjoy most about your PhD?
Yeah, completely agree with what everyone said so far. Like, absolutely the community aspect and, like, you know, being there with your mates that you make during the program. I think also just like I'm a really hands-on person, like Alison, just like I kind of can't sit still. I always need to be doing something, and just you know, being in the lab and being able to sort of just always be hands-on and try new experiments, but also just like constantly be learning, and also from your colleagues as well. I just found that was probably my favorite experience of the PhD. Just this, like, the fact that you never really stop learning. You never really stop where you think you are, and you're sort of like knowledge level on the project. You can always kind of go deeper in a topic and learn more and more. And I think almost it's a bit of a black hole, because the more you learn, the more you start to doubt yourself, like how much you actually know about the topic. But yeah, for sure, that was probably one of my favorite things about the PhD.
Yeah. So I guess I personally I've been quite surprised by you saying how social it was. Was there anything that surprised you about doing a PhD? Something that you didn't expect going into the program, but that you realized doing it once you finished? Shelley?
I guess I always kind of saw myself as a lazy person before my PhD. I guess I guess I probably worked hard in honors, but that was for a short amount of time. But I think what got me my PhD is like, yeah, I got really motivated to work harder, and that surprised me about myself. And I guess also, yeah, you learn a lot about yourself. I think I realized that I could work quite independently and like have the confidence to do that. Yeah, I wouldn't have expected those things going in.
Stephen, what's surprised you?
Yeah, I was just thinking about it for a moment, but I think ultimately this is more for my chemistry work, but I was surprised how emotionally invested that I would get. And that could be a really double-edged sword. There were times where I was so excited and interested, and I'd go in the lab and I'd spend ludicrous numbers of hours in there doing whatever it was because I was intensely interested. But when it didn't work, and I'm sorry to say to everyone here, it won't work at some point. It's going to happen more than once. You need to find ways to deal with that, because it can be, or at least for me, it was quite overwhelming. There were times where it would really get to me. It would be struggling when I was at home. I didn't full go into mental health concerns, but there were times where I don't know that it was that far off, because it can be very hard to have long periods of time where you don't get the results that you want, even when you're working so hard to do it. So I think I was surprised at the emotional aspect of the PhD that I just didn't quite predict.
Alison, what surprised you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to preface this by saying it probably sounds really sad, but it's actually not. So what I think has surprised me the most is that the more you learn, then sometimes it feels like the less you know. it's almost like you're discovering new questions as you learn a piece of information, which I guess can be disorienting, and it can be saddening a little, but I actually think that on the majority, it's a really great thing because it means that there's so much more that you can learn about. And kind of just learning to sit with that and say, oh, here's a great question that I don't know the answer to. And that's okay, because I'm not actually supposed to know everything. I'm just supposed to work on one thing and find out one thing about that one thing, rather than being expected to know everything all the time. So I guess that's what surprised me the most, is that the more I learned, the less I knew, to some degree. But it's actually a really great opportunity to keep moving forward.
Yeah, and to ask questions and get comfortable with and have that passion for finding the answer, I think is definitely, it's key to research, right?
Yeah, and also it's a great opportunity to then think, oh, well, maybe there's someone that does know the answer to this new question, and maybe I can go and talk to them, and yeah, use the people around you.
What surprised you, Jono?
Honestly, for me, it was the first time I went on a international conference, like very fortunately funded as well, like from the PhD, and coming to the realization that this huge, chemistry materials research community, just for argument's sake, is actually so small. Like everyone really knows each other in terms of networks, and it kind of I don't know, it just really surprised me in the sense that you think, it's this huge research community out there, and so maybe some communities will know each other, but it's really connected. Like I'd say you go between one or two people, and you would find someone that to a complete stranger out in the chemistry community. Yeah, it's a really nice aspect, I think, as well, about research.
So the next question is kind of sort of related to that, I guess. It's obviously a bit trickier with COVID, but were there opportunities to study abroad or to meet your international colleagues during a PhD? Stephen, or do you want to jump in?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's pretty rare to not, okay, of course, COVID times have changed everything, but normally speaking, and this was Shelley's point, that a huge benefit of academia is that we do exactly that. We interact with internationals. We either have them come visit us, or we go overseas, or we do work overseas. As part of my chemistry PhD, I got to live in Boston for 7 months and worked at Boston College, and that was just a great excuse to be in North America. I got to go to New York a bunch of times, but also the work that I was doing, and I was working under Larry Scott at the time, who was a very big name in his organic chemistry field. Yeah, it is pretty common to get those opportunities to go overseas. It's not a guarantee, of course, but most universities have a funding scheme that at least lets you go to an international conference. So it's very common to have access to at least that, and it should be done. If you get the opportunity, I cannot stress enough how important it is to do it. It's such an amazing chance to go work overseas, meet new people, and do new things.
Yeah. So onto a bit of a harder hitting question. What did you find most difficult about your PhD? Shelley, I might get you to start.
I'm trying to think.
I can come back to you if you like.
No, it's like, yeah, the days experiments didn't work, the days you were tired and you made a mistake and you ruined their experiments that would have worked, equipment that failed, like all of that stuff really gets you down. I think I was just looking at the Q&As that people are putting these questions in, and I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about all of those questions now. You were poor. that was kind of shit. I don't know, like, yeah, like you do get, like Stephen said, really emotionally invested in your experiments because they're yours and you designed them, and you feel a bit like your identity gets like more tied up in them than anyone else's because you know them best. Like you know them way better than your supervisor. You know these things best than anyone in the world, and if they don't work, sometimes it feels personal, like that they failed because of you. And so like trying to separate you from your results and you as a person have worth compared to your results being useful results was really hard. And I think something like everyone in science struggles with all the time. Like that doesn't go away. You just get better at it. And like going home and like ranting to your other science friends or talking to people who don't care about science, like that helps.
Alison, what are you currently finding most difficult about your PhD?
I think those days when things don't work, are also the thing that I would find most difficult, or even just the idea that there'll be this long stretch of time where stuff isn't working and then all of a sudden maybe it will work. I feel the way I approach it is that I just expect nothing will work and then I'm really happy when it does. So that's how I personally manage it. And having a supportive family and people around you, I think, is a really great grounding to know that it doesn't matter what happens during the day at uni. It's always the case that I'm me. I'm not my experiment. I guess the other thing I'd find difficult is narrowing down your research enough that you can actually kind of take a step forward in the right direction rather than kind of sideways all over the place, which is easy to do. So that would be what I find difficult at this point.
Jono, what did you find most difficult during your PhD?
Yeah, I think it's definitely those days, weeks, months where things just don't work like that. It does drag you down. I think as well, it's like all the plate spinning you have to do in a PhD. So like keeping track of different deadlines, trying to publish work, apply for fellowships, like that kind of stuff just becomes completely overwhelming at times when things are also not working in the lab. I think just pushing through that is really hard.
Thoughts, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody's hit the biggest nail on the head, which was the negative results and starting to try and stop yourself internalizing that. The only other thing that I would add, and Alison and Jono started to go towards it as well, is the multiple directions and the fact that you can almost go in any direction. And for me, that was too enticing. So I started doing like 7 or 8 different things because I was curious. And you have to stop yourself and go, no, I need to finish this story to get this chapter, to get this paper. You need complete data sets in order to get to the other end. But when you get naturally curious about, oh, but what if I threw this in there? What if I did that? And so fighting against that can be really, really challenging because we're intensely curious people. That's part of being a scientist. It's a balancing act.
Yeah. So I'm definitely hearing a lot of kind of that juggling and time management skills, but also a lot of resilience is really something that you learned throughout your PhD. What other skills did you get out of your PhD that you found were valuable? What did you learn?
Talking to people, like being less scared of talking to people. I was really shy and I had trouble public speaking or talking to anyone or explaining my ideas. And yeah, I think you just have to do it and you get used to it. And then it becomes fun. And you're like, oh, I'm just telling people who like what I like about things that I like. And that was something I never expected to learn, that I really enjoyed. And then, yeah, alongside that, like, and it kind of ties into that's like learning to manage your supervisor. Like learning to like have someone more powerful than you who has so much control over you and somehow negotiate that with them to get what you want to happen in sometimes or like compromise with them. So yeah, I didn't think that would come from a PhD, but being able to go to someone more powerful and say, this is what I want, how do we find a way for you to help me do that thing?
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective you never really think about is how do you balance that relationship. Stephen, what was the valuable skills you got from your PhD?
Yeah, it's probably not going to be a surprise that I raised this one considering what I went on to, but it's teaching. So I think that not everyone does it, and I think it's a real shame if they don't, which is to take an opportunity to demonstrate, to do some tutorials if it's available to you. Teaching is such a great opportunity to really also nail down your understanding of everything that's going on, let alone your communication skills. And it's a great skill to get you employed at the other end. I think we often will say to someone, look, you can do a PhD, and look, you'll be poor. You get a little bit more money out of teaching, but we don't talk about all the other stuff you get out of teaching. And I think that's where we're doing a disservice. I think that is a huge part of what any PhD should do, and everyone should try to tap into that. I think it's an amazing opportunity.
Jono, what about you?
Yeah, 100% agree with both Shelley and Steve. Like when I started my honours project, first year PhD, awful public speaker, got really nervous before talks. And I think, just all the opportunities you get during the PhD where you give talks within the group, you also give seminars, really helped with that sort of public speaking aspect. And 100% agree with Steve as well. Really enjoyed demonstrating back when I was a PhD student. And it really does improve your understanding of the topic, because you kind of get into the perspective of the student, like, okay, how do I explain this to someone learning this the first time? I think the main skill I got out of the PhD was probably time management. Just trying to prioritize things based on like what's urgent and what's important, and prioritizing kind of urgent things faster and then going with the important things. Like instead of doing probably what I did for the first 2 years of my PhD, which is get really excited in lots of things and sort of go down little rabbit holes. I think I sort of honed in on that towards the end of my PhD and started my postdoc, the time management aspect. I think I'll also add just on the last thing about all the failures in the lab. It's, obviously on paper, it's awful. You can't really publish the failures. But from an experience perspective, I feel like I learned a lot more from the failures than I did from the experiments that actually worked. I don't know, to me, I learned more about the system I was working with from the failures and from things which just straight up didn't work than the things that did work.
That's a really good perspective. I think like when you're an undergrad, it's all about, getting good grades and getting everything right. But actually, you learn a lot from when things go wrong, and being able to explain why it went wrong, I think is really useful heuristic. So the next question, I guess, is we're just going to imagine there's a couple of people in our audience who are probably at different stages of their kind of decision about whether or not they do a PhD. And the first one is if you were to give some advice to a student who's just finished their honours, but they're just not sure about whether or not to do a PhD, do you think they should do it? Do you think they should get maybe take a break or look for a job first or try a few labs? And do you think the research area they pick matters? Actually, did I skip Alison? Did you want to mention anything about the skills you're learning during your PhD? Or sorry.
Yeah, sure. No, that's okay. I mean, I'm only 1 year in, so I have plenty more to learn, I'm sure. I'm not sure what it is quite yet. I was going to echo Stephen's comment about teaching. I've just begun teaching, which has been a really great opportunity for me. I've really enjoyed it. The thing that I was surprised to learn, I think, is all about the equipment and the maintenance care for everything that's in our lab. Sorry, I just need to clear my throat. So we have a lot of equipment that takes a lot of maintenance, like glove boxes, which use nitrogen cylinders, and there's all these valves and pumps and everything. And so I've really enjoyed kind of getting stuck into like managing that and knowing about all the equipment as well. I'm quite a hands-on person, so that was really something I didn't expect to learn, but I'm really enjoying. And I had something else, although I have temporarily forgotten. Oh yes, I remember. Something else that I'm learning is that there's all of this kind of thinking that we normally skip when we make a decision. Like if I'm going to go into the lab and I'm going to pipette something, maybe in honours I would have just kind of done that, but now in PhD I'm stopping and thinking, okay, but what about this variable and will it affect it in this way? And kind of thinking through things more thoroughly, which yeah, I think is a good skill to learn, to be able to be kind of aware of all of that thinking that goes into your decisions that you might otherwise make really quickly and not realize that you're doing that, which is a cool thing to learn. And yeah, that's what I have learned. Glad I remembered since you asked.
Sorry about that. So back to the question about what sort of advice you'd give to someone who's trying to grapple with whether or not to do a PhD. Jono, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, the advice, it's going to be a do as I say, not as I do type deal, because I definitely just jumped straight out of honours, straight into a PhD. Basically, like, I think like a lot of people, you applied for the APA or, you know, the government scholarship at the time, and if you got offered it, you're like, fantastic, that's something to do afterwards. If I went back and did it again, I'd say, yeah, really have a think about if you want to do the PhD. And I think absolutely the research topic and the group you work in is really important for this. I would also say, you know, if you can, during undergrad, try to take as many opportunities as you can. And I think, like we said earlier, you know, work out what you don't like, so that you know, I think there's always going to be compromises, even with a topic that gets you really excited. But end of the day, I think if you can say, okay, with those compromises, and where maybe it's the business that get me excited in the future, whether it's the academic path, being a lecturer, or maybe if it's within industry doing research and development, or like a more senior role. These might be good sort of motivators for you to continue doing the PhD. But yeah, I guess that's maybe what I'd advise.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So I was gonna say I didn't do mine right away. I had a gap. So I did science arts and I did physics honors halfway through my degree. And then I had this choice, do I stay in science or do I go back and do arts for 2 more years? And I went back and did arts for 2 more years. So I went from like 4th year physics to 1st year English. And I went on like exchange. I went to Russia for a semester because I had this stupid idea that I was going to learn Russian. And yeah, it took me almost 2.5 years to decide that I wanted to. And it was a great time. And I was kind of worried, like, oh, am I going to be behind? I felt like, oh, I'm 3 years behind on my friends. And it absolutely didn't matter. Like, those were such fun times. And I guess, you know, it's such a cliche, but you are only young once. And there's this stuff that you can do when you just graduate where you can just go off and do cool stuff that you don't always have like the space in your life to do. And similarly, like you can start a PhD and you don't have to finish it. It's like, if you find that it's wrong for you or you're not sure, you could just try it and yeah, see how it goes. Like, we do encourage most people to finish them, but you can leave with a master's. You can do lots of things. Like if you figure it's not like you're trapped into doing it, basically. If you feel undecided. So I kind of thought, yeah, like I can do it later. And that was really helpful for me because I felt like I could be more serious maybe after that.
Yeah, Stephen, what about you? What are your thoughts on what advice you give to the undecided PhD candidate?
Yeah, I think I really like Shelley's point there that there is no rush. So I think a lot of people get it in their head that I have to decide now what the rest of my life's going to look like. I've changed my mind so many times, and we all do. As you learn more and you interact with more, yeah, you might shift how you're going to go. If someone was trying to say, oh, I've got an opportunity or someone that I could do my PhD with, I would say that the topic is important, but personally, I think the supervisor and the group are more so. You're going to be working with these people for 3 years. If you don't get on with your supervisor, or at least can't have a healthy working relationship with them, that's not going to go well. And I'm not saying that you have to be best friends with your supervisor, but you should be able to have real conversations and be able to say, hey, here's what's going on for me. This is what I need to work through. Without that, I just don't think it's going to be feasible. The research group as well, again, they don't have to be the kind of people that you go drinking with all the time, but you want a nice collegial environment, one where you can talk and be relaxed at work and work with one another. So I think those are more important than necessarily exactly what it is that you're researching.
So, and Alison, as a recent PhD, would you kind of share that sentiment that any other advice for PhD candidates?
Yeah, I guess the thing that hasn't been said already is that if you're considering PhD and you're narrowing down groups, you should try and reach out to the students of the group as well as the supervisor and just say, hey, what is it like to work in this lab? What is it like to work with the people that you work with? Because I'm sure they'll give you a very honest response as well. You can believe them. Of course, the supervisor always wants to make the research look good, and often it is, but checking that with what the research students say and getting a second opinion is a good idea there. And I didn't do that. I should have. If you're wanting to work in my research group, definitely email me. Yeah, so that's a good thing to consider.
Yeah. So I guess kind of leading on from that, what advice would you give to a student in terms of picking which research group to join and picking their supervisor? Stephen, do you want to go? Oh, Shelley, you can go.
Yeah.
I was going to follow up from what Alison said. Is like the sign of a good supervisor is somebody who encourages you to speak to their students without them there, and who would facilitate it. And that's like really important. And good supervisors know that. And they wouldn't feel like worried or threatened by you asking to do that. They would think, oh, the person is like looking through their options. And I guess sometimes when you're a student, you're looking for a project, you're like, oh, I can't hesitate, or I can't show that I'm uncertain. Like, you going through and being like careful about your choice is the sign of a good PhD student, and you doing your research and your due diligence. So never be ashamed of that. Like, any good supervisor will see that as a really excellent trait that in you. And so don't feel like you have to hide it. What was the actual question? That was just me responding to Alison.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to a PhD, someone who's about to start their PhD, in terms of picking which research group or which research area, what to look out for?
I don't know. That's really like, there's some like red flags of like, if people are crying in the lab, that's not good. I guess like, know what your work style is. Do you like detail? Do you like to meet every week? Do you want to talk about everything, or do you want some independence to go off and work for 3 months alone and have trust? Or what kind of supervision do you work with? What way do you like to work? I'm not a morning person. If I was joining a lab, if they had meetings at 8 a.m., that would never work for me. So like, there's small things about just how you work, and finding the right mesh with that. I don't know. I narrowed mine down to 2 labs, and I joined the one where everyone went to lunch together because I liked groups who went to lunch together every day. Like, small things like that matter, and it's okay to make choices like that don't seem like the most scientific, but are about your like quality of life.
Yeah. Thoughts, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, just to expand particularly on that last point of, it might feel weird that you're making these decisions on personal aspects, but a PhD is a deeply personal experience. It's not just the science. It is about you and how you're going to go through it. So you need to make sure it's good for you personally. I also wanted to add that not only would a good supervisor encourage you to talk to their students, but a really good one will even tell you to go talk to the other academic staff. Go see if they've got a project that you might want to do. No one really wants, well, maybe not no one, but most of us don't want a student who doesn't want to be there. We want to make sure that you're in the right mind space. You want to do that work. You want to be working with this group. So we're going to encourage that. So if your supervisor is being very secretive about that whilst you're talking to them, probably a big red flag, I think, is a fair thing.
Jono, what are your thoughts?
yeah, I think Shelley and Steve have like hit the nail on the head there. It's 100% about just like the complete openness, I guess, about the research group. And I guess end of the day, you want a supervisor who is there, that wants to, you know, help you in your career, whether that's staying in research or going into industry or doing something else afterwards. You know, there's no sort of like personal conflicts of interest in what they want to achieve, like whether they want to publish lots of papers and get lots of grants. If you know, if you meet a supervisor who's there to just help you, then I think that's usually a good sign. And again, you know, of course, I advise, especially all the students over here that I have, when they're joining PhD groups, I do the exact same piece of advice. I say, go talk to their students. You know, if you don't know someone, I'll try and put you in contact with someone, but have a chat, see what it's like actually working in the group, see if it suits your lifestyle. That was actually a big thing for me, actually, like joining my postdoc. I really enjoyed the social side of Parley's group, and I wanted to join a group over here, but I still wanted to have that social side, that social sort of collaborative side, because for me, that's a big part of being in the research lab. It's also being able to, you know, have a chat with your colleagues and you know, maybe grab a beer with them after work type deal. So yeah, I think absolutely on all points that are raised here, you know, end of the day, just make sure they're kind of there to help you. They're not kind of like using you in a sense.
Yeah. Do you agree, Alison? Anything to add to that?
Oh, I forgot I hadn't gone yet. Yeah, I didn't actually have anything to add. I think it's been said well.
So it definitely sounds like knowing your supervisor is really, really key and knowing how they work. So I guess is it important to stay at the same university, or would you recommend going to a different university to do your PhD, or is just having that familiarity with the professors really important? Stephen?
Hard one.
Oh, Shelley?
No. Stephen has a good answer to that.
I don't know that anyone's going to have a good answer to that. I
Yeah.
think in Australia it matters less. I don't think there's as much pressure to go, you've done your undergrad, now go elsewhere. I think you might find it more in the UK and the US. When you talk to people there, it's more common for them to leave that institution and go elsewhere. But realistically, if you do good work and you get to your conferences, you get your name out there, your work gets published, that's going to matter more. I don't think you'll find many people who care that much that you've stayed in the same institution, but that's just from what I've encountered. I don't know, Shelley, John, or Alison, if you have other people who feel differently. That's my perspective on that. That doesn't really matter.
Yeah, Shelley?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, you know, yeah, academics are snobs, so it does help to go to a name, like the name brand thing in science is a thing, and it does help. So going to a big, rich university always helps. That doesn't mean you can't do well from a small institution, from a smaller group. I guess, you know, as long as the place that you're at has the resources to do what you want to do, I think that's important. Yeah, and you know, that can be, you know, because it's a big brand university, or it just happens to be well resourced in your area. I think people do tend to move at some point, like at their postdoc, or it depends what you want to do, I guess. Yeah, I don't think there's a right answer.
Bit of a tricky one. Yeah. Jono, any advice?
Yeah, I don't know. I think yeah, I think at the end of the day it doesn't really matter. Like there are some perks definitely of going to like big institutes and stuff like this, but yeah, end of the day, I think you're like just as good staying at your undergrad institute, if not maybe even better off if it suits your lifestyle better and you already have like a social circle there and a really supportive supervisor. You know, I think it's also, you know, a big thing. Say for example you did move overseas for your PhD. you know, it's not just a case of packing up and moving over there. It's like you're moving your whole life type deal. So there's also those considerations as well if you sort of pack up and go to another lab. But yeah, I agree that there's no right answer here. I think it's very case by case.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had advice given to me between honours and PhD to move to another institution, but I guess I ignored it because I'm still at Sydney Uni, where I did honours. And I guess that's because I enjoyed the science I was doing and I enjoyed the place socially that I was in. And also I didn't want to move like the rest of my life. I guess that's an important thing. You know, we talk about science like it's all we do, but we're also humans that have families and hobbies and, you know, all this stuff that makes us complete. And for that, I wanted to stay in the same place. So that's how I made my decision.
Yeah. So for the student who's just starting their PhD, what advice would you give them in terms of how they go about their PhD? Is it pay to be someone who's really a big planner, or and then also things like you know, do you work casually on the side? Do you just take all the opportunities? What's the best way to manage the PhD? Alison, do you want to go? I think you're kind of right in the throes of that.
Don't take all of the opportunities, just take the best ones. Yeah. I love opportunities, so I jump into everything, and that's often been really helpful for me because things come up that I never would have thought that they would come up if I hadn't done X, Y, Z in the past. But I think it's worth being strategic about what you're doing, opportunity-wise, making sure that it contributes to your goal, whatever that goal is.
Shelley?
And I'm saying this to myself as much as to this person, just in case you wanted to know.
Yeah.
I'll hold up a mirror.
So yeah, Shelley, what would you say? How would you approach the PhD program itself?
And I try and tell myself that still about research projects. It's like, it's never a linear progress from the start to the finish. Like, it's a lot of slow going, and then suddenly stuff happens. And like, I don't think there are many people who would say that in their first year they got much that they put in their thesis. Like, and then the last 6 months are this golden time where everything works and you're like, well, this is science is fantastic. And then you start a postdoc and you're back in the flat bit again and it sucks. So I guess like just be not linear, and you know, try and manage your expectations of that.
Jono, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, totally agree with just being flexible about research. I think also just like it's good to like just take a step back every now and then, and not focus on if things aren't working and stuff like that. Like I guess one fun thing that we used to get encouraged to do in Harley's lab was to set up a Friday experiment, which is essentially just just throw on something curious. I think also could be bad, as Steve said, like it throws out this like curiosity that you run down this rabbit hole and you follow it because it might be really interesting. But I think like basically the main point I'm trying to make is just, don't take yourself way too seriously throughout the whole PhD, and just have a bit of fun with it every now and then.
Yeah. Great. And Stephen, anything else?
Yeah, I think the big thing that I learned was just to keep a better eye on the other end, rather than just thinking, oh, I'm going to be in this forever. This is what I'm going to do forever. Well, no, it will eventually end and you'll have to go somewhere next. So asking, okay, well, how is what I'm doing going to prepare me for that? Am I gathering or getting a skill that's going to be useful in that later job? Is what I'm doing now going to finish this project to get this paper? Or am I, as we've said multiple times, just following our noses and being curious? There's nothing wrong with that. It's just when that becomes the only thing you're doing that it becomes problematic. So making sure you're getting your projects and finishing them off, tying a little bow around it, rather than just trying 17 new things. I think that's the hardest of the lessons, and it's the biggest advice I would give.
Yeah, being purposeful and focused.
Yeah.
So onto quite a big and serious question that I'm sure lots of people have. What was your experience with finding work after completing your PhD? Did your PhD help you understand what you want to do? And did you feel too qualified for a lot of positions? And did you feel confident about pursuing a career in academia? Because I think pretty much everyone here is in academia. Yeah. Shelley, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess it's stressful at the end. You're like, well, there's this cliff coming, and if you're living in another country, it's like a visa cliff as well as a money cliff. And yeah, it's a stressful time figuring out what to do next. And you know, I was lucky, I got some good papers that turned into a good postdoc. Yeah, that's one of the things, I guess, especially the downsides of going through doing a PhD is like, when you're young, there's so much career uncertainty and it's really stressful. And like for my postdoc, I was in America and I was always on a 1-year contract, and it kept getting extended, but it's like you don't know what country you're going to live in next year, and if you've got a job next year, or you have to, or what your employment opportunities might be. And I think looking back at it now, there's way more opportunities for PhDs than I realized at the time, because now I see all my friends did totally different stuff with their PhDs, and they've done so many different things, and those skills are all super transferable. But at the time, I felt very blinkered from that. I didn't realize, and I got super stressed about it. But if you do it, especially the way Stephen did his second PhD, if you're strategic about it, you can really get those skills and have evidence of them along the way that make you super employable outside. And all of my friends who did PhDs and are outside academia now are like way more rich and more happy. Not more happy. they do like maybe slightly less intellectually stimulating work, but super lucrative, super well paid, very satisfying careers, great lives.
Stephen, how did you find finding work after finishing your PhD? How did you find falling off the cliff?
I hit the bottom. Look, for me, it was quite difficult because, and the word that I really want to pick out of what Shelley just said was evidence. I didn't have enough. So even though I knew I was a hard worker and I was bright enough, or at least enough to do those jobs, I didn't have enough to put into an application so that I could be ensured an interview, or to be able to talk through in that interview and really impress them. And that is so important. And it's a shame that I wasn't more mindful of that and more thoughtful around making sure that I was gathering the kind of evidence that I needed for the other side. So even things like coming back to teaching, I did plenty of it, but I had no evidence of how good I was at it. I just did it. And so that's something that you really do have to go out of your way to get. Not all of the structures and systems are in place to make sure that you are given the kind of evidence that you need. So you need to be more proactive. And so for me, it was really hard. There was months of sending out applications and not getting interviews and feeling like, oh, great, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? It was not a fun time. Sorry, Andrew, there were more questions. There was like 4 in one there.
Yeah, sorry. Just ram a bunch of them in there. But so yeah, so I guess the questions are did the PhD help you understand? Like, obviously for you, it helped you understand that you really love teaching.
Yeah.
But did you find that you were too qualified for a lot of positions? And
yeah. No, that's actually a really weird point. So it got to the stage that I went on Centrelink. Yeah, that was good times, everyone. But they made me go along to training, to interview and all that kind of stuff. And they spent the entire time being like, why are you here? They didn't know how to work with me or interact with me, because they were like, you have a PhD, you should have a job. They couldn't comprehend that. And so a lot of positions, if you go for it, it's not unlikely that they might say, we don't want to give you this job. You'd only be doing this to kill time or to make some money meantime. So yes, it does happen. You can become too qualified for some positions. And that is more a game of waiting it out. It can take a while before you get that golden opportunity. And I would say B, in the meantime, thinking, how can you develop more skills that are going to make you more employable? Doesn't necessarily mean a full new degree or anything like that. But let's say you didn't have proof around your teaching, you can keep demonstrating. That's very common, and go get that proof. Go get that extra evidence of how good you were at those things. So yes, I think I've answered all the parts.
Yeah, I think you've gotten onto something really important, which is like the like star stories for your interviews, because often you can kind of sit down for an interview, and then it's like, I know I've done this, but I don't know how to tell them that I've done this. Yeah.
Yeah, the way that I often advise people these days is you need a narrative arc for whatever you're going to talk about. It needs to be, what did I do? You know, what was the impact of that, and where's my proof?
Yeah.
That has to be the full story.
Jono, how do you find getting work after your PhD?
Yeah, stressful. I was really lucky though. Like I think it was the second job I applied for. I got the offer, which is like feel really grateful for it. But you know, even thinking next career step, I'm still really stressed about that. I have no idea if I can continue in academia or if I go do something else. And I think a similar thing to what Steve touched on was the being overqualified part. So I sort of came out of my undergrad honors, I think, an aggressively average student, and I remember applying for jobs out of my sort of honors year, and I really hadn't built my CV at all, to the point where I just wasn't getting any interviews or anything like this. So I kind of tried to improve my CV coming into my PhD, and really think about, like, you know, what I had to do to be competitive afterwards. And yeah, was quite fortunate, I think, to be able to land a postdoc afterwards. But yeah, it's definitely a really stressful thing. I'm still a bit stressed about it, to be honest, going to the next step. But I think it's just one of those things where you gotta kind of, yeah, I'm just gonna, I guess, tackle it head on and see how we go.
Yeah. So this is a pretty important question for the student, and we mentioned it's okay to kind of to take a break or to stop, but for the student who started their PhD but is just really struggling, or they're finding it's not quite right for them, what kind of advice would you give to that student? Alison?
Well, that was me in the middle of last year. So I started in March in 2020, and we all know what happened in March 2020. I took my books home and decided I would read some papers that day, and maybe that week, and then maybe that month, and then maybe that 3 months. And after 3 months, I went, I'm just trying, not succeeding, to read academic papers. I have no output. This is not a good place for me. What should I do? And luckily, I was able to kind of swap projects around. So I essentially started again 3 months in, so not that long in, really. I started from scratch, threw everything out the window and said, that's not working, we'll start again, something different. So I guess it depends how far through you are, whether that is an option for you. But maybe you could try and kind of take a right angled turn and go somewhere different with the skills that you've already learned. Seems like that would be a worthy conversation to have with your supervisor, whether that is something you can figure out. To take a different angle. We had a student in our group who wasn't happy, and after 2 years swapped project and took what he did know, and that will still go in his thesis, but he then went and worked for a different lab for a little while, almost like a research exchange, to work on something that actually he did want to do. So I guess my advice would be that things are probably less set in stone than you might expect, but it's worth kind of weighing up how badly am I going here, and if it's affecting your mental health, then definitely prioritize that. And it is okay to stop. There's no shame in that. You know, it's much more important to keep who you are as a person intact, I think. At that point, if that's what it's come to. Yeah.
Shelley, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with what Alison said, that, like, you know, over time, what you do right now, it's gonna blur out, and it's not gonna make a big difference. Like, you know, maybe it feels like a big deal now if you get this result and you get this degree, but it's not that big a deal. Yeah, it can feel really important at the time, and it's like all or nothing, but it's really not. And like, if you are struggling, like, there's plenty of people to reach out to. Sometimes it just feels like everyone is doing fine. I'm the only one whose experiments are a failure. My supervisor hates me. I'm an idiot. Like those are things we all think during PhDs. Like, and it's totally universal. And if you reach out to people, they can support you. And that it's fine to take a break. You can take a leave of absence. You can come back to finish your PhD. You can. My favorite story is when I did my PhD, one of my best friends was in astrophysics, and his lab, one of his like co-PhD students was Brian May, who was the guitarist in Queen. And he quit his PhD because he was like, I want to be a rock star. And then he was a rock star. And then he went back to finish his PhD the same year as my friend started his. And he was always like, oh, Brian May said like such smart stuff in lab meeting today, and he's a rock star too. Like, but like your life can follow many paths, basically. Like, you don't have to finish it now. You don't have to finish this one. You can do a different one. If you didn't like this PhD, like Stephen, you can do another one. Like, there's no one path through it. Yeah, that's kind of like, it's not everything.
Yeah. John and Stephen, anything you'd like to add? Or I think I'm seeing lots of shaking heads and yeah.
The only major thing that I would add, I sort of alluded to it before, and we're skirting around it here, is you need to ask why. Why is that person struggling? There might be very legitimate reasons, and there likely will be, but we haven't said mental health. And I think that is something very, very important. Many postgraduate students do struggle with mental health. It's incredibly common: anxiety, depression, many other considerations. And I think we need to normalize saying that is a thing. It's very, very common, and it's okay to reach out and seek help. Almost every university that I know of, I don't think any of them would not have psychological services that are available to those students. So making it an okay place to talk about that, for people to come out and say, hey, look, I'm struggling with X. You go, okay, here's where you can go seek help. I think we need to be better at saying that and talking about it.
Yeah, so we can go into some questions from the audience. One of the ones was kind of related to that idea of getting evidence and kind of transitioning from your PhD into whatever's next. And the question is, what are the best things to be doing during your last year of your PhD? Jono, do you want to?
Some of the best things during the last year of my PhD. It's probably the nice results coming in, to be honest. Like 2 and a bit years of stuff just not working, and then just like, yeah, it was almost just like a dream. Just get all these nice results coming through, and gets you really excited about research again. You kind of get that spark again. And then you have to.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify. Yeah. No, so like the best things to be doing, like for experience in the last year of your PhD. So.
Oh yeah. I think I guess maybe by this point of your PhD, you've kind of worked out what parts you like and what parts you don't like. I think it's good to look at some jobs that excite you afterwards, and within that last year, see if you can get skills and experience if they're required of the next job, whether that be, for example, learning how to use Python if you want to go more into like data analysis type work, or say, for example, you want to work in an academic lab and they specialize in a certain instrument. Like, you know, try to get experience in that area. Try to, you know, just try to, like, honestly, just try to learn as much as you can and help yourself in the next position.
Shelley, what are your thoughts? What's the best things to be doing in your final year?
I mean, I didn't want to sound pessimistic, but continue to eat well and shower every day and like take care of yourself. Like, yeah, it can be a stressful time. Yeah, like as people have said, look outwards, look for the options, what sets you up best for the next option that you want, and have a set of options so you're not always putting your eggs in one basket. Like you've got like multiple ideas of what you could be happy doing and pursue a couple. But that thing, like Stephen was saying, have evidence of what you've done that you can show people. And it's really hard writing about yourself. But I guess in the last year of your PhD, you start to apply for postdoc positions and postdoc fellowships, and you have to get really good at writing about yourself. And it's hard. Nobody likes it. Everyone finds it like really embarrassing and icky, and you just kind of got to push through that. Or like have a friend write your CV for you or your research kind of statement. Like, but yeah, maybe practice writing about who you are and what you've done.
Yeah. Stephen, any tips on what to do in your final year?
Yeah, there's only one thing I don't think we've covered, which something that I was actually really bad at, which no one believes me because I'm actually an introvert. I'm not an extrovert. As loud as I am, at the end of the day, I'm very comfortable with people I know and I avoid people I don't. And that's not great. You need to be able to network. You need to be able to meet new people. And one of my favorite stories is a colleague of mine, and Jono knows her, this is Sinead, who wanted to get a postdoc with a particular academic in Germany, reached out to them. A job was not actually on the table, but Sinead managed to talk them into giving her a postdoc anyway. And it's one of the most beautiful examples I've ever seen of someone just being great at networking, being great at talking to people, getting out there, and in that case, creating their own opportunity. I'm not saying that's normal. No, that is not. But the more you talk to people, the more you find out about positions that are out there.
Yeah.
You can't apply for things you don't know about. So getting to know people, getting them to know you, it is an incredibly important part of all of this.
Yeah. And as an extension of that, Sinead is very involved in the RACI as well. So she definitely utilizes it pretty well to build her network. So yeah, a really valuable tool. Yeah. The next question is, what are some things you could do, a kind of similar thread, some things you could do to make your CV more appealing, whether it's going for academic roles or industry roles. Alison, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mentioned that a lot of times I throw myself into things maybe more than I should, and then things just come up. So that's my strategy, for better or worse. I think the teaching is a really helpful thing to have if you want to do academia. Things like RACI I find are great. You get to meet lots of people. I think that if you think of something that you are interested in being involved in and you think, oh yeah, maybe I'll go along to RACI events. Obviously you've thought that because you're here. Get involved in the leadership of that event because it will make you go when you might otherwise think, oh, I'm a bit tired, I won't go. You probably have a lot to say on this as well, Andrew, but I think it's good to be identifying things that you enjoy or organizations you want to be part of, and then go and see if you can help make stuff happen with them, not just participate.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like getting involved, as like I've met so many more people and got so many different perspectives that I wouldn't have got, and I'm not even sure if I'd still be in chemistry if I hadn't joined, because like Shelley, I did something a bit wacky. I did arts too. So yeah, it's good to, it keeps you in the loop, and you get so much more information. Yeah. Jono, what do you think? What's some things you could do to improve your CV?
Yeah, I think absolutely get involved in outreach and everything RACI's doing. I sort of did that actually towards the end of my honours year. Got very involved with the early career chemist group because on my CV I was actually lacking a lot in outreach. I just hadn't really gotten involved, so I wanted to sort of improve that. I think as well, just have a look at. You can't have if you're sort of thinking about improving your CV, right? You can't really have a generic CV. You always need to tailor the CV towards what job you're applying for. And so I think have a look at positions that interest you, you know, look a bit forward to what you might want to do next. And then you can start looking at getting skills to add to that, to your CV, which would then help you, you know, potentially get an interview or get a position, that kind of stuff. I think you can be really broad about things that you could add to your CV to make it stronger.
Yeah.
I've thought of something else to add in here before we move on, which is just find stuff that you enjoy doing. You know, the world doesn't have to be like, I'm a robot trying to build my CV. I'm trying to, you know, do X, Y, Z. It's all job, chore. Like, just think of something that you like, you find fun, and it comes a lot easier then.
Yeah. So I think we've just got time for two last quick questions. This one's an interesting one. What would you suggest to someone to help them overcome unwillingness or procrastination when it comes to writing and publishing papers? Shelley, any thoughts?
I don't know. Can you get them to tell me the answer when they find out?
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't go away. I have like a science procrastination like folder of like websites I'm allowed to go when I'm like work procrastinating. You know, yeah, sometimes your brain doesn't want to do what you're asking it to do, and so like do something else, but have it be something that gets you excited about what you're trying to actually do. Like my brain won't do what it's told, it has to be get there itself. So I just like read some cool papers about something totally random, and usually that like gets me to the like, okay, I want to write my paper now. But I know it's hard. It never goes away. It's challenging.
Stephen, you said that you are not a big fan of the writing part. How do you push through it?
It is kind of one of those things. Every now and again, you do just have to suck it up. It's not the funnest thing, but sometimes you got due dates and you just deal with it. But I'm also a big fan of writing retreats, where particularly if you can get with some colleagues or whatnot, and it's really nice if you can get out of wherever you normally are. So not just meeting in a meeting room, but some of my favorite examples, a group of us all went somewhere that was a bit more remote. It was a beautiful location. You still have access to the internet, but you hold each other accountable. Like, all right, everyone, what are you going to do on these 2 days that we're here? And someone says, oh, okay, I'm going to write this, or I'm going to do this task that I've been avoiding. You just check in, but you kind of force each other. You're like, no, you said you were going to write this thing, and you get it done without the other distractions of being at work, people knocking on your door, people wanting to talk about X, Y, or Z. So getting away from it and giving it dedicated time, I think, is one of the best ways that I have managed to do it sometimes.
Yeah. And so I guess last question, what would you say to the PhD student who is loving their PhD? Alison, I think that might be you at the moment.
Most days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Enjoy it. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely like we talked about lots of downsides, but it's like you have total freedom in a lot of senses in your PhD that you don't have afterwards. And it's really fun.
I guess make the most of it while you're doing it.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I think we'll wrap up here. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming and for your insight. It's been really valuable, and I've learned a lot, and I'm sure a lot of our attendees have too. Yeah.
And Andrew, I just want to add, I know this was your first hosting experience. You did a great job, mate.
Oh, thank you.
This was really, really well done.
Yeah, thank you. And to our audience as well, we've got a second one, a follow-up event in a couple of weeks' time. So if you've any questions that you've missed, you can tune into that one. We've also got a different panel as well, so they'll have a bit of a slightly different perspective as well. So I think a bit more industry focused. Yeah, thank you everyone for coming and for watching, and enjoy the rest of your night.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Andrew.